picturesque Indonesian islands that lie to Australia's north, fishermen take to the sea. This is how they make their traditional living. But these islands have become the launching point for thousands of people fleeing war-torn countries like Afghanistan and Iraq. Refugees who hope to make it south to Australia by boat. A lot of money is on offer to drive those boats, even though the consequences are great. More than 200 Indonesian fishermen await prosecution for people smuggling in Australian prisons, and the numbers are growing. I'm Ella Callan. On this edition of 101 East, we meet Indonesia's people smugglers and ask if they're the real culprits or victims in a much more complex criminal web. The Indonesian islands of Nusa Tenggara are less than 300 kilometres outside of Australian territorial waters. Life here is simple, revolving around the sea. Most people have only a few short months each year to make their living on small fishing boats after the monsoon. That leaves them vulnerable to highly paid jobs on people smuggling boats. I'm here with interpreter Stuart J. Raj, who's been working on behalf of dozens of Indonesians who've fallen foul of Australia's people smuggling laws. He's acted as translator and witness, giving testimony in the trials of more than 25 Indonesian boat crew in Australian courts.
I've been coming back to find their villages and get information from their families, to take photos and interviews of local people, just to find out what the situation is like here so I can pass that on to the juries in Australia.
Stuart's discoveries run contrary to one popular narrative many Australians believe about people smugglers.
These Indonesians thought that they were going away for a 4 to 5 day job and they'd be home at the end of the week. And they still want to be home. When they're captured and they're put in detention or in the prisons, they want to be home. They don't want to stay in Australia. So that's one misconception, that the Indonesians they're the ones wanting to migrate to Australia.
The asylum seekers come from countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan and Sri Lanka, paying thousands of dollars for treacherous journeys on small boats. Few issues in Australia are as highly politically charged. Elections have been won and lost over policies of border protection.
We have been and continue to be determined to break the people smugglers' business model.
Over 4,500 refugees travelled from Indonesia to Australia by boat last year. 2,500 more have arrived so far in 2012. The numbers are tiny compared to arrivals by plane. Almost universal blame falls on the men who bring the boats, the so-called people smugglers, for whom mandatory jail terms of 5 years apply.
People smugglers are engaged in the world's most evil trade, and they should all rot in jail because they represent the absolute scum of the earth.
But that's a long way from the Indonesian town of Kupang in West Timor, where young men spend their days at the docks waiting for work. Faisal was 17 when he was offered a well-paid job as a cook on a tuna fishing boat.
I was there. I was unemployed at the time. A friend of a friend came along and said there was work going. They told me how much was on offer, and I thought, okay, I just went.
Faisal was flown to the Indonesian island of Java, where he boarded a boat at night. The next morning, he says he discovered there were foreigners on board.
Once I was on the boat and we were already sailing. I asked the captain, where were we taking these people? and he just said we were taking them around. There were 136 people. It was all mixed. There were babies, children. In the beginning, I didn't know where we were going. It was only when we were almost at Pulau Pasir or Ashmore Reef that I found out we were going to Australia.
Faisal's journey would end up in a prison cell.
Pernah takut?
Pertamanya takut.
This smiling teenager is, in Australia's eyes, a people smuggler. At first, Faisal was kept in a juvenile detention centre in Darwin. But after 4 months, without warning, he says he was transferred to a maximum security adult prison in the Australian city of Brisbane.
Takutnya karena di dalam situ kan banyak penjahat, dari ada yang pembunuh, ada yang narkoba, dan pemerkosa dan lain-lain lagi.
Because all of a sudden I was put into a prison with murderers, with drug dealers and all these other bad people in there. So I was afraid.
Faisal says he spent 5 months in the adult prison despite telling authorities repeatedly that he was under 18. He was given a wrist X-ray to determine his age through bone density, but this technology has been widely disputed by the medical community. His Australian lawyer, David Svoboda, travelled to Kupang himself to get Faisal's birth certificate. The day before Faisal's age determination hearing, the court threw the case out. David says juvenile Indonesians are often kept in adult prisons in Australia.
There's been 30 to 40 cases that I know of over a lengthy period. I personally have been involved in 3 matters, and a number of other lawyers I know in Brisbane have been involved in 6 to 7 matters. So it is common. It's happened a lot over the course of the last 7 to 8 years, actually.
Faisal's mother, Sache, is grateful for David's efforts to prove her son's age. Australian authorities can still use wrist X-rays to verify age as a last resort, but the technology remains controversial.
Dia bukan pencuri atau perampok atau apa.
He is not a thief or a robber. He was just tricked by a job offer in Bali. But in fact, he was taking people to Australia.
Faisal is once again working on a fishing boat. He would like a more secure job, but there are few, which is why highly paid offers are so tempting.
No, I didn't think anything. I just thought, wow, I get all this money and I get to go on an aeroplane as well.
So who is responsible for recruiting these young men, and how far do the tentacles of the people's smuggling ring go? When I ask Faisal's mother, she says the family caught the man who recruited Faisal just a few weeks ago.
The third time he came to Kupang, we arrested him ourselves on a passenger ship in the harbour. We held him here for 5 days in this house.
Faisal had been promised the equivalent of $1,000 to work on the boat, a small fortune for the family that was never paid. So they held the recruiter hostage until they got some of the money.
Katanya pengurus.
He said he was one of the organisers.
So if they can find the organisers, if her family can find the organisers, why can't the police find them?
Saya tidak tahu itu. Karena waktu
I don't know. It turns out that he'd already been here twice before. He'd already been through Kupang to take illegal immigrants.
The recruiter is long gone and probably only got a tiny percentage of the profits for his role. The money men higher up in the smuggling rings are more likely on the Indonesian island of Java. This is where the refugees are hidden and where the final payments are made before they can get on boats to Australia. It's a well-known route. The refugees fly into Malaysia and travel south to Java, where they wait until the boats are ready and the crew arrive. Their destination is either Christmas Island or Ashmore Reef, both in Australian territory. The aim is to get caught by Australian authorities so the passengers can apply for asylum. And that means the Indonesian crew go to jail.
So the question I would be asking is, how do these people get through the borders so fluidly without documentation? That might be a good start to see who the smugglers are or who the higher-ups are.
To follow the smugglers' trail, Stuart is asking about places and people described by the boat crews during their court cases in Australia. We hope to find some refugees who are just days away from getting on a boat. They could tell us how they move around and who they've paid.
We've been asking around for about the last 3 or 4 hours, and it seems pretty common knowledge that there's a safe house where refugees are being kept in this area before they go to Australia. I'm not going to say where we are because we could put people in jeopardy. We're also going to leave our broadcast camera behind because it could be quite dangerous. Let's go.
People point out where the refugees are staying, but warn us that the house is being watched. After a short motorbike ride, our helpers tell us we're on our own. We meet 7 Afghan men, but it's not safe to film here, so Stuart arranges for us to speak to them over the phone.
Where do you want to go?
I'm going to go to Australia, but a lot of problems in Australia going, and I stay now in Indonesia.
So going to Australia, do you know how much money did it cost you altogether since you left?
Altogether, 18,000.
18,000 US dollars?
US dollar, yes. I come to Malaysia. He take me passport. The guy bring me from airport, but he take the passport as well.
The man at the airport, did he work at the airport or it was an Iranian man?
No, he's an Indian man.
Indian man?
Yes.
Okay, do you know his name?
I don't know his name, I don't know.
These guys, basically, when we were talking to them, they did confirm, didn't they, that they're waiting now to get on a boat to Australia, that they've come through customs in Malaysia and handed their passports over. They've said that they also paid money to make sure that they're not arrested by the police, and that it's a very dangerous situation for them now because they're being watched.
Yeah, and actually that they anticipated that they would be arrested and beaten by the police before being released and getting onto the boat. So they just accepted that this is what was in store for them in the next 5 to 14 days.
Unexpectedly, one of the refugees contacts us again. He wants to meet us and tell his story in person. He tells us he was an interpreter with the US Army in Afghanistan and is now running for his life.
Some Afghani people, some Taliban people, they said, I'm a criminal for some of the Taliban because I work with the United States.
Right.
I was with the US Army as an interpreter. They say it's illegal in Islam.
We will call him Amir. He's 22 and has never been on the ocean. He says he's paid $19,000 to smugglers. In Afghanistan, they're called kochakbar.
Kochakbar is not the Afghan people. I think there is 55 or 30 kochakbars.
Sorry?
55 or 60 different people.
Yeah, different people.
Smugglers.
Oh,
Yeah,
the kochak.
Yeah, the kochak.
The kochak,
What do you call it?
Human smuggler.
Human
smuggler,
smuggler.
yeah.
50 or 60 different people you
Yeah,
get in contact with.
55 or
Wow.
30.
All the way from there to here.
I don't know years, but the number is Indonesian number.
Yeah.
Yeah, the number is Indonesian number. And some of the human smugglers from Pakistan. More from Pakistan. Yeah, more smugglers from Pakistan.
Until we told him, Amir did not realise how small the boat he would be taking was, or that the Indonesian crew would end up in prison in Australia. But he says he has no choice.
I told you I was scared, yeah. I was scared about that. More people told me that the way is very dangerous, the sea is very dangerous. I say it's up to God. What should I do? When I've been in Afghanistan, it's also dangerous way, so dangerous life.
These young Afghani men will place their lives in the hands of inexperienced Indonesian crewmen. Men like Kasim Magan. He is also 22 and has just been convicted of people smuggling. Kasim is being held in a maximum security prison in Brisbane. Our next stop is to see his family to deliver the bad news. It's a long journey. To get there, Stuart and I must take 2 planes and then a boat, flying over just some of the 17,000 islands that make up the Indonesian archipelago. Kasim left home at 16 to look for work, a concept known as merantau.
You have to understand, in Indonesia, it's not like you have a regular job or you go out, especially if you work on the oceans. They go there and wait around for work, maybe to a port with many boats, and people take on crews. And so some of them have been like that and been recruited like that, just got onto a boat. Some of them, the village head has told the kids, the young people, to go out and help their uncle on the boat make noodles. And they didn't realize that they were being fed into these people smuggling syndicates.
Stuart has been to Kasim's village before to get documents and evidence for his trial. There's no way to contact his family in advance other than coming here to let them know he's lost his case.
We're going to travel to the island of Pantau, which is where Kasim Magam is from. We want to take some news to his family, but also I'm curious as to whether his case has been a deterrent for anyone else getting involved in people smuggling. But what's really clear when you get out here is that this is almost an endless recruiting ground for the people smuggling rings. If someone gets found out, they can simply move on to the next island.
Local politician Eni Anggrek is with us, concerned about the rising tide of young men from her region ending up in Australian prisons.
We would like to let people know that they honestly don't know anything about legal documentation or visas. They are just villagers who don't know anything. They are from small villages and don't know anything whatsoever about cities or other countries.
As we navigate across the island, it becomes clear how isolated and impoverished Pantau is, and how widespread people smuggling has become.
This gentleman here had just walked up and said, "Oh, I've just come back from Darwin." But yeah, it's there are many people recruited from these areas, especially when they merantau.
So how long was he in Darwin?
Jadi berapa lama di Darwin, Pak?
Saya 1 bulan di Pulau Christmas, 4 bulan di Darwin.
So 1 month in Christmas Island and 4 months in Darwin.
His name is Odin, and he also spent time in an Australian jail for people smuggling. Not only that, he was on a boat with Kasim Magan's uncle. 2 men from the same family recruited onto boats bound for Australia in separate incidents. Odin takes us to Kasim's family home. By now the whole village knows we're here and wants to hear news about Kasim.
We have a crowd.
Wow, we have the entire school here.
Selamat siang, Bu. Jadi bisa ingat saya dari 2 bulan yang lalu ya.
Stuart explains to the extended family that Kasim will not be returning home for at least another 2 years.
Sadly, he's lost the case, and there was a decision by the 12 jury members that he was guilty, and so now the penalty for that is a mandatory 5 years. With 3 years good behaviour, 3 years probation that he can apply for.
It takes some explaining to the family about the appeal process and why the jury reached its decision. There's a great deal of confusion among the group about why Kasim was at fault if he was working to help refugees get to Australia.
I just hope that you can help him to come back quickly, because we are here waiting for him. He didn't have enough schooling, that's why people could fool him. He got tricked over there in Roti.
The other 2 men have the same story. Without knowing that Kasim was already in Australia, they too were recruited as people smugglers.
We were tricked. If we knew that we are going to Australia, we wouldn't have gone. The boss called and told us to come to Jakarta to ship some wood from Batam. But it turned out that once we had arrived in Jakarta, they said there were some tourists we would be taking as passengers. We were already on board and the captain got off. There was a fight and we were afraid, but stayed on board. They told us what direction we had to follow.
The men cannot explain why they were allowed to come home after 5 months in Darwin. The whole process, let alone the legal reasons behind it, still seem baffling to them. But they say detention in Australia was pure luxury. They got medical treatment and were well fed. Their greater concern is that they haven't been paid.
It was good, our experience in Australia. But we were constantly thinking, what are our families eating now? We thought that every day and we were concerned about them, although we were eating well. It was tough for us knowing that they were over here.
Both are ashamed of leaving their families without food or money.
We are good people, we are not evil. All we want to do is find a living and support our families. We had no ill intention towards anybody.
As we say goodbye, I wonder how many more stories like this exist on thousands of islands across Indonesia. There is no easy solution.
Saya kira itu bukan prolog soalan Indonesia saja, tapi
I don't think that this is just Indonesia's problem. These people smuggling operations are difficult to detect. Indonesia has so many pressing political and economic problems of our own that we need to focus on. We don't just want to become a night watchman keeping an eye out for Australia. These kids don't have a political agenda, nor do they understand about international law, but they need to put food on the table.
Politicians in Indonesia say part of the solution must be economic. Increase the incomes of the locals so they're less likely to take smuggling jobs. But that's not easy. 2 years ago, Australia ran an education campaign in 14 villages, but no one we spoke to had heard about it. The Australian government declined 101 East's offer to be interviewed, but says it will review the convictions of 24 Indonesians believed to be under 18 and serving time for people smuggling in adult jails. Lawyer David Svoboda says getting tough on the so-called smugglers is costing Australia dearly.
From arrest to charging to serving a prison term and then deportation back to Indonesia over the course of 3 years, you're probably looking at about $1 million in total.
$1 million?
$1 million.
And there are currently 200 cases in Australia.
That's right.
Apa kabar, Bu?
David has been responsible for 13 acquittals. One man, Abba, who was deported from Australia in February, has stayed in his mind. David is taking us to see if Abba made it home to Indramayu, outside of Jakarta.
Terus Pak Abba ada nggak, Pak?
Nggak ada Pak Abba.
Nggak ada, he's not here. Dia lagi di mana, Bu?
Berangkat ke laut.
Berangkat, he's gone out to sea. Oh,
nyari cumi.
He's gone out squid fishing.
Abba's family is grateful to have their breadwinner back after struggling with a lack of food and illness while he was in prison in Australia.
There's been a big change, I think. Everyone looks happier and certainly a whole lot healthier. When we came here last year in November, there was a sense of despair within the family, which was really clear and quite heart-wrenching, actually.
This family's story has ended well. David will continue to fight on behalf of Indonesian boat crew who find themselves accused of being people smugglers.
Certainly when a jury in trials becomes aware of the circumstances of these men and who they are, I think there's an awakening amongst the jury that these men are not people smugglers that politicians have described as scum of the earth. These are simple, peasant, impoverished men who out of financial necessity have taken a job on a boat.
While people continue to flee war-torn countries and take desperate measures to get to Australia, there is money to be made. And right now, on a small island, in a village somewhere, An Indonesian man is being made an offer to get on a boat. An offer probably too good to refuse.